Welcome back to Movie Recapped. Today I will show you a drama, horror, sci-fi film from 2017, titled The Cured. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. For many years, the Maze virus has spread across Europe, rendering those infected in a violent, psychotic, zombie-like state. Even though the cure has now been found, 25% of the treatment cases remain unsuccessful. As the government debates the fate of the resistant 25%, the successfully cured 75% of the infected are facing reintegration issues. The rest of the society still views them as a threat, murderers who should be treated as such. Senan is reminded of horrible memories of his past, blood dripping on his shoes, his breath hollow and quick, his eyes bloodshot red. He looks upon himself in the bathroom mirror, and when he makes sure there are still some red blood vessels on the lower corner of his eye, the indication that a person has been cured, he calms down. He sits on the bathroom floor and recollects when he hears the bathroom door creaking. His friend Connor sits next to him and asks him if he is okay, but Senan does not answer. He only asks Connor how things might be in the outside world. Connor reassures him things are going to get back to normal, but both of them know that this is unlikely. In the office, Cantor asks Senan for how long he was infected with the Maze virus. Senan was infected for 4 years. After further procedural questions, Cantor asks if Senan has any nightmares. Officer Cantor strictly believes that nightmares are beneficial, for it reminds people of what they have done while being infected and how much suffering they have caused. Cantor announces that Senan will be taken in by his sister-in-law, Abigail. This is a rare instance, for most of the cured were not wanted by their families anymore and would have to stay in the accommodation centers. Later, Senan and Connor are walking towards the bus that is going to take them to their new location accordingly. The bus is making its way to the accommodation center through a city full of militia, UN troops and camps. Protesters are waiting outside the accommodation center where the bus stops. The people throw objects on the windows and call the cured murderers. Soon Senan and Connor have to part ways. They embrace, and Connor tells him it was best to hide the truth from Abigail. The public is divided when it comes to the reintegration of the cured. While some think the previously infected people can't hurt anyone anymore, others believe that they are still a danger to society. Meanwhile, the government thinks that the elimination of the remaining 25% who cannot be treated is the most merciful solution. Abby is a reporter working behind the camera for a news channel and lives alone with her son, Killian, after her husband's, Luke's, demise during the virus outbreak. While Abby was helping Killian finish his homework, a knock is heard on the front door. Abby opens it to greet Senan with a tamed embrace. Later, Senan and Abby chit-chat in the kitchen, and Senan reassures her that he doesn't have to stay. Abby tells him that it's what Luke would have wanted. Finally, Abby asks Senan if he was there during Luke's last moments, but he doesn't say much about it. During the night, Senan is unable to sleep. He sits on his bed as thrown back years ago. Senan was in the very same house with his brother Luke while the evacuation sirens were ringing outside. Luke was looking for Abby and baby Killian, but they were nowhere to be found. Senan urged Luke to get out of the house and tells him that Abby would know what to do when a shadow emerged from behind and attacked him. Luke quickly defended his brother and tried to hit the intruder with a hard object. But it was too late, the blood was already running crimson on Senan's arm. Senan, knowing well that he was now infected, told Luke to leave the house at once. The next day, Connor is standing in his father's yard, waiting for the moment that he would come out. He asks him if he can help him find a better job, since now he is working as a cleaner, a position far from the courtrooms he was used to before he was infected. His father, however, is furious at this request, and he pushes his son against the car, calling him a monster and refusing to help. Senan rides his bike to work at the treatment center. A blue helmet checks his eye for the blood vessels forming a circle on the white of his eye. When the officer confirms he is indeed cured, he enters the building. There, Senan is required to help Dr. Joan Lyons deal with a patient who is still resistant to the cure of the Maze virus. The resistant, Jo, is restrained to a bed, and as soon as she sees Dr. Lyons, frenzy takes over her. The resistant screams and growls and tries to free herself to attack the doctor. Dr. Lyons asks Senan to hold Jo down for an injection. Senan quickly notices that the woman's only object of crave was Dr. Lyons and not him. The doctor tells Senan that once someone is infected, traces of the Maze virus can still be found in one's cells even when cured. In other words, the woman recognized Senan as one of her own. Senan arrives at the accommodation center to meet Connor. When he tells him that the resistant do not attack the cured, Connor concludes that the cured are safer with the resistant than with the ones that were never infected. After all, the cured are hunted down and attacked in the streets. The conversation is interrupted by Officer Cantor. Cantor sits opposite Connor and confronts him about skipping work, but Connor proclaims that he is not a cleaner. Cantor arrogantly states that Connor doesn't have the same power as he did before the outbreak of the virus and that he should obey the rules. Furthermore, he orders him to stop contacting his family, for they do not want him back. This is when Connor snaps. He attacks at once, but Cantor is quick to throw him on the floor with such force that Connor does not rise to fight back. When Senan tries to intervene, He is held back by 2 armed men. Connor considers his message received and leaves the room while Connor is still laying on the floor in pain. Connor is waiting outside Abby's house, hoping to see anyone he knows. When he sees her walking out, he introduces himself as Senon's friend. Abby, who is generally open to the cured, talks to him and even asks him about his experience with the virus. Connor shares that it was brutal, a constant feeling of being trapped inside your own body. What was worse, however, was not being able to resist your urge for bloodthirst. Back in the treatment center, Senon is taking a break when he notices 2 soldiers leaving their post and entering the building where the resistant are kept. As Senon carefully walks down the stairs, he hears the muffled screams of the woman. Senon follows the voice to an unlocked cell where he finds the 2 soldiers. The first soldier is keeping a woman resistant down as the other one was urinating on the floor. Senon rapidly tackles the man aside, but the man was much stronger and Senon finds himself stuck against the wall. Amid the confusion, the resistant has released herself from the arms of the soldier and has started to chase him through the corridors of the ward. The second soldier doesn't wait. He picks up his gun, follows the woman and shoots her without missing. Senon watches her gasping for a last breath, but the soldier guiltlessly proclaims that she was going to die soon anyway. The cured in the accommodation center are listening to the news. Dr. Joan Lyons is opposing herself to the plans of the government about the elimination of the resistant and insists that she could find the cure for them given the time and the resources. The hostess, however, like most people, talks about the elimination of the 5,000 resistant as an act of humanity. The oppression of the cured has driven Connor furious and desperate for change. He believes that the elimination of the resistant is just the beginning and that it is a matter of time before the government turns against the cured as well. He takes Senon down at the basement of the accommodation center where an uprising is being organized by the Cured Alliance, a terrorist organization fighting for cured rights. Makeshift bombs are being readied and Connor hands Senon a bottle of alcohol ready to be lit. He assures him that the homes they are targeting are empty. That night, houses of Irish defense volunteers are bombarded or set on fire and Senon truly believes he is doing the right thing. After all, Connor has an enormous influence over him. The next morning, however, Senon hears on the news that due to this attack, several civilians are injured and one is found dead. This is when he decided to distance himself from the Alliance and Connor alike. Senon's flashbacks do not stop tormenting him and he is once again standing in front of the mirror, reminded of the horrible memory of his shallow breath and his brother, Luke, trying to talk some sense into him. He felt Connor's presence behind him but did not acknowledge him, because now the only thing he wanted to do, attack. Senon came back from the flashback almost in tears. In the treatment center, Senon discovers a picture of Dr. Lyons with Joe. She and Dr. Lyons found the cure together before Joe was infected. They found it very unfortunate that the patients remembered the atrocities they did while they were sick. Abby has noticed Senon staying late out at night and suspects his involvement with the Cured Alliance. One day, she confronts him about it but Senon denies it at once, saying that he simply does not want to be in his way. Abby sits down and confesses that she considers him family. After all, she and Callian had gone away from the city to escape the virus outbreak, losing Luke in the process. When Abby heard about the cure, she has hopes of returning home to him where he would have recovered. However, she only found his body in the house. During dinner time, Connor knocks on the door. Abby tells him to take a seat and tips Killian to go to bed. The 3 of them talk about the terrorist attack and Abby notes how hard it must be to live in the accommodation center but Connor opposes that at least someone was arrested. Abby seems convinced that the person arrested wasn't acting alone but she is not harsh towards the cured either. She reveals that she truly believes in forgiving the cured for their actions, since they were not in control while sick, and therefore it is insinuated that she would forgive Luke's killer as well. When Abby leaves the room, Senon confronts Connor about the casualties of the terror attack but Connor seems adamant that there are always casualties in a fight. However, Senon does not want to be part of the Cured Alliance anymore. He has started viewing Abby and Killian as his own family and he is not willing to turn against or endanger them. The next day, while Senon is driving Killian to school, Officer Cantor visits Abby at her house, presumably to ask her how living with Senon at home is. However, he soon reveals his ulterior motives. Cantor believes that the cured are still a pack, a herd of monsters looking for people to kill and feast upon. He slides an envelope of confidential documents across the table and urges Abby to contact him if she wants to share anything with him. When she opens the envelope, she is startled to see pictures of Senon and Connor while they were still infected, both zombie-like and with eyes of beasts staring right at her. Abby decides to visit the accommodation center along with her camera and what she records there is horrifying. 5 cured standing in a circle, eyes closed and breathing with synchronized, short breaths. In a gathering, Connor is giving a speech, encouraging the cured to rise, take arms and rebel. As Abby is discreetly filming, she is violently pushed against the wall by a woman that seems feral and wild and that only steps aside after Connor orders her. Connor takes Abby to an empty room to confront her about why she was there. When Abby tells him she is certain he was involved with the bombings, Connor reveals the nature of his cause, the treatment of the cure being so horrible, He has seen no other choice but to turn against his oppressors. Abby wants nothing to do with it and orders him to leave both her and Senan alone. After all, she doesn't think their former sickness binds them in any way. She storms out, clutching the bag where she has hidden her camera. At once, she notices two cured watching her in the corridor. With a quick leap, she makes a run for it, climbing the stairs and finding a window where she can flee. A hand grabs her just as she is about to jump, and just in the nick of time, she escapes the grasp, running away from the accommodation center. In her office, Dr. Lyons is watching Jo on her monitor when she notices that for the first time she is tranquil and calm. She visits her in her ward and tries to communicate with her, and at first, Jo seems unresponsive, yet the moment Dr. Lyons spreads her hand out to Jo, she attacks her with frenzy. By the time Dr. Lyons draws back to escape from Jo's grasp, the soldiers, alerted by her screams, are already in the ward and are yanking her back. This, for them, was the last straw and would mean that Jo would be taken to the euthanization ward along with the rest of the resistant. Just like that, Dr. Lyons' vision of curing the rest of the resistant is lost. It is a relatively quiet night and Killian is already in bed, when at about 10 o'clock, the door is smashed open and a hooded man enters with a baseball bat. Rapidly, Senan finds himself unconscious on the floor and the last thing he can hear is the man calling him cured scum. This is a sign for Senan that staying away from the Cured Alliance is not going to keep his family safe. The next day, he returns to Connor's team, which is now willing to make a bold move in order to force the public to listen to their requests. The same day, Abby searches for her camera. She notices that her discs with the videos of the Cured planning their attacks are gone and is at once certain that the person behind the break-in is Connor. Therefore, she calls Officer Cantor right away, urging him to intervene. Back in the accommodation center, Connor takes Senan to a Cured meeting, where he is surprised to see Dr. Lyons. Saving Jo is the only thing she is interested in, which only gives Connor the weapon he needs. He believes that having a resistant with them is the only way for the government to take them seriously. The meeting is interrupted when havoc wreaks in the building. Soldiers raid the halls, chasing after the Cured, but Senan refuses to fight with them. When pushed up against the wall and asked where the rest of the Cured are going, he doesn't respond. Even when interrogated by Officer Cantor and promised protection for him and his family, he does not say a word but heavily considers it. Connor is adamant to keep Senan in his family, so he doesn't hesitate to find Abby and tip her off about who truly killed her husband. That night, Abby waits for Senan to come home in tears and demands to know the truth. To Senan it is now obvious that Connor has told her something about that day, so he confesses at once how even though Luke closed himself in the bedroom, Senan eventually lost himself and attacked. Abby, betrayed and in tears, tells him to get out of the house. At midnight, when Connor meets Senan, he admits that he indeed tipped Abby off about Luke's true killer to show him the real nature of the uninfected when they come face to face with the truth. The discussion was short when the subtle sound of a gun locking interrupts them. Officer Cantor emerges from the shadows, orders both the men on their knees. Although Senan does not object and starts cuffing himself without opposition, Connor quickly grabs the shards of a broken beer bottle that is laying on the sidewalk and attacks Officer Cantor, stabbing his neck open violently. When Connor realizes Senan has betrayed him by leading Officer Cantor here, he grabs his gun and points it right on his head, demanding to know why he gave up on the fight. Sirens can be heard in the background and Senan realizes there is no time to waste. He demands to know what Connor's plan is and to terror Senan's. Connor confesses his plan has already been manifested. He flees before the police are able to get to him. The next day, when the plan to obtain Jo is set in motion, Senan decides to stop the Cured by sneaking into the resistance ward. Dr. Lyons and a Cured are in the control room where she can unlock Jo's cell door through the security system. Before she knows it, however, the Cured is pointing a gun at her face and is unlocking all the doors in the resistance ward. Senan is there when the doors open at once and all zombies are released in the corridor, growling and looking for their prey. It is not long before the Cured bomb and take down exit to the resistance ward, and soon the resistant are running wild into the free world in a state of frenzy. Dr. Lyons is watching in horror from the control room but then realizes that even though everyone has left the resistance ward, Jo is the only one who does not even leave her bed but is rather staying quiet and peaceful, seemingly cured of her infection. She approaches her carefully, sitting next to her, and is only able to give her one last kiss before a savage resistant attacks to get a bite of her. Abby is sitting silently in her house when she hears noise from outside. She leaps outside with an axe in her hands and knocks a zombie with a blow on the neck. A UN truck is approaching, evacuating the neighborhood, but the thought of Killian hits Abby. An officer tells her all schools are also being evacuated, but she can't help but scream in a desperate need to set herself free and run for her son. Senan is bolting towards the house at that moment when Abby sees him and recognizes him as her last chance to save her son. Through the gunshots and shouts, she screams for him to fetch Killian. Senan reaches the school to find people either dead or changing into zombies. He shouts and shouts Killian's name, and when he finally hears his brittle voice behind him, he takes the child in his arms and runs. He is blindly unaware, however, that Connor is standing right behind him, following him. Senan, clutching Cillian in his arms, tries to walk to a safe place in the city but soon comes to notice that the zombies are everywhere. One is after them and now Cillian has to run on his own, chased after by 2 vicious zombies. One would think Connor, who is watching closely, would help, but instead it is Senan that he strikes down. With words of betrayal, he starts beating him, throwing his fists into his face. It is by wonder that a bullet hits Connor on the chest and at last, Senan is free to finish him off. It is at that moment that he hears Cillian's voice asking for help. He finds his nephew hiding under a car, only an arm's length away from the resistant that were after him. After Senan takes them down, he sets Cillian off and thinks it is safe to start making his way back to Abby. In the meantime, Abby was restless in the safe spot where the civilians were gathered. She was not satisfied waiting in for Senan to show up with Cillian and decided to escape. She finds her way back home, hoping that Cillian would be waiting for her there, and when she hears him calling for her, she takes her son in a loving embrace. It is not but a moment later that a zombie attacks Cillian from the back and bites his arm. Senan is quick to kill the resistant off, but it is already too late. Cillian's transformation has already begun and Abby, in a moment of despair, contemplates mercifully killing her son. Senan, however, knows there is another alternative since Dr. Lyons has managed to find a cure for all who are infected, and promises to cure Cillian and bring him back to his mother. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.